Hello everyone, and let's talk about cutting smart, not blind. Namely, broad, blind, across-the-board cuts can be quite detrimental for government functions. It can weaken critical services like defense, health, and actually cost us as taxpayers a lot more money. So we need targeted precision cuts. For example, a great place to cut is NASA's Space Launch System, which costs over 11 billion to develop, and it's estimated to cost 2 billion per launch compared to 100 million for the SpaceX Starship, which is quite more than sufficient to replace whatever the Space Launch System, our ability of it to get pounds to space would be. So switching to the SpaceX Starship would save us billions annually. We should just let go of the Space Launch System, have the attitude that sunken costs are sunken, not fall into the sunk cost fallacy, and redirect funds toward more urgent priorities, like addressing opioids trafficking. The counter-fentanyl strike force, for example, is great and effective for disrupting financial networks behind trafficking. Synthetic opioids, as I'm sure you're aware, contributes to a huge public health crisis that costs a lot of our taxpayer dollars in treating the problems, in dealing with the problems, in dealing with the crime that's resulting from them. So continued funding is very important to fight the epidemic, and it will save us money. It is saving us money. It will save us more money in the long term. Another thing to think about is Medicare fraud. Now, Medicare fraud drains billions annually. If we cut auditing, which currently we should be really increasing auditing to cut the waste, to cut the fraud, if we cut auditing instead, which is if you cut auditors, you'll cut auditing, that will really harm us. So we need to instead increase the funding and hire more auditors for Medicare. Another area to hire more auditors in is the IRS, everyone's favorite agency. We see from clear data that IRS enforcement return on investment is 500%. We get $5 for every $1 investment, making it a highly cost-effective solution. So cutting IRS funding is something that will widen the tax gap, and Donald Trump acknowledged that during his first term, he actually increased funding for the IRS. So what can we do instead, more broadly, instead of just having these, find the underperforming programs? We can have zero-based budgeting. Zero-based budgeting involves starting each new budget period with a zero instead of the previous budget year. And so we have to justify each year, each program. So that's an approach that focuses on having each program justify its value each year rather than just keeping the previous approach going. Another is leveraging data analytics for efficiency, using generative AI and other analytics tools to identify inefficiencies in real time, detect fraud, and enable precise interventions. So those are alternative, broad approaches that can have a lot of benefits instead of just across-the-board cuts, like forcing federal employees to all return to the office. Some of them will leave, and it will be people who are most able to find jobs elsewhere. And that will not be good for our ability to run an efficient government. We need to recognize that ideological opposition to a big government ignores practical realities. In some areas, the government should be smaller, like NASA, the Space Launch Program. In some areas, it should be bigger, like Medicaid fraud catching and IRS spending in order to get more of the fraud in tax evasion out of the system. If we don't spend enough on things like security, on health, on actually collecting money, it will cost us more in the long run, and it will raise the public debt. Smart reforms should balance fiscal responsibility with effective governments, and we should have precision cuts and broad approaches like zero-based budgeting and using analytics and generative AI to catch problems rather than just cut across the board. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Please subscribe to this podcast wherever you checked it out and leave a review. It helps others discover the show and it helps us improve the show. And if you have any questions, email me at gleb@disasteravoidanceexperts.com.